I love days where we have no question about what season we're in. I can only imagine, this is Father Kyle's favorite season, right? It's just one of these great mornings that reminds us we're in the throngs of fall. It's beautiful. Mine too. We're presented in the gospel with the most interesting line, and I think it bears some time to break it apart. Repay to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Jesus used this saying to turn the table on the Herodians and the Pharisees who were playing this kind of gotcha game. That's when someone asks a question that would back another person into a corner no matter what he answered. My father always told me that this could happen within married life on both sides. I think every husband and wife always probably has a little gotcha question every now and then, just to test the other, right? Yes, no? Maybe this is just something my father made up. I don't know. Well, the temptation's there. No, but this is what's happening in there. They're trying to catch him in this gotcha. But Jesus was a lot smarter than they were. He was not going to let the Herodians declare that he was an enemy to Caesar by refusing to pay taxes, nor was he going to let the Pharisees declare that he was an enemy to the Hebrew people by paying taxes to this occupation force. So the phrase, render to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's, has deeper implications to us here in the U.S., and this is across universally in every country. It calls us, first, we have to break it up into the two sections. First, render to Caesar what is Caesar's. In a way, this invites us. Jesus is calling universally, first to the Jews of his day, and to all of us throughout time and history, no matter where we exist, where we live, under what, political system we're in, we're called to be thoughtful citizens. This is under no matter what type of rule we're under. This is the same across the board, whether we're here in the U.S., in France, in Russia, in China, North Korea. How am I being invited to be? And some people don't have many options. And so for us in the U.S., we don't want to take the options we have for granted. We have much more than some people in the world do to engage in that faithful citizenship. And so it brings us to mind, how are we doing that? So we have a responsibility to be a good citizen of our country. I think on some basic level, at least, for us here in the U.S., that means participating in protecting our country from those who were destroyed by, either joining the military or by supporting those in the military. We have basic, these are things that we have basic common elements from the very beginning, at least in our country. The federal system was founded to at least preserve and protect that basic thing. And we want to, it's something that we all enjoy, and so we want to participate. What members of the military do is protect our country, even if it means sacrificing their lives for our nation. So we have a debt to all who serve or have served. Second, we have a responsibility to take an active role in our government from town hall to D.C. See, Alexis de Tocqueville was a Frenchman who toured our country in the 1820s and 30s, and he was pleasantly surprised at how the average American citizen values speaking up at meetings and working together with others for the good of the town, the city, the state, or federal government. This was not something he experienced anywhere in Europe. So if we as Catholics want the laws of our country to be based on principles of Catholic morality and justice, we have to take part in the government, not just be bystanders. And we have opportunity that others don't have in the world to be able to do this, to take advantage of this. You know, we can actually have active participation. And so yes, we need to vote. But more than vote, we need to be actively engaged in the working of our government. I mean, there was a few things, one of my favorite things as a kid. I loved going with my dad to the annual town meeting. I was thinking I was the only 10-year-old. Nothing was funnier to me than watching what grown men and women were being so passionate about. I remember one particular year, I think there was an hour-long conversation, passionately heated, over whether or not the town should buy a ladder truck for the fire department. But then I was amazed at how quickly the school budget was passed. You know, it's like, maybe, there should be some balance there. This is a 10-year-old's mind. This is a 10-year-old mind just looking at that. But also, too, part of when we talk about voting, we want to actually not let some advertisement tell us how to think or how to vote. We want to actually be thoughtfully engaged on our own and use our mind and our thought. And like, for instance, I just realized, not too long ago, I finally figured out. Did you realize that there are 8 questions, referendum questions, on the ballot in the election this November? 8. I did a little research. There is a nice 62-page guide on the Maine Gov website that gives every question a little bit of a summary and just the body of the text and everything like that. It's like, okay, if I'm going to be thoughtful and think about how to thoughtfully vote on each of those questions, I got to do a little homework. I'm not going to let the advertisements on TV tell me what direction or not. I want to do a little bit, use it as a guide, but in the end, I have a responsibility to use my brain that was given by God to see how does this work in accordance with, the Christian morality and justice. So we need to vote, and not just in the big ones, in every election. We can't take a back seat. Our Catholic voice needs to be heard. And the other piece in that is, is support our government by paying our fair share in taxes. Now, that's a different, in terms of how much, how it's done, that's a healthy debate. That needs to be done, because no one likes taxes. I don't know about you. Every year I tell my accountant, I pray you don't have a job. And he says, me too. No, but it's seriously, no, but all of us want to know that our country is going to protect us, and do it in an ethical and just manner. And when we're sick or elderly, care for us. We need to pay for all those areas that we share in common, whether it's soldiers, sailors. We need to be sure that our towns, cities, counties, states have the resources where they need to govern us correctly. We need to pay our first responders, police, fire, all who work in those departments, that we all share some benefit, right? So all of us who pay taxes from local to federal are invested in our government, and we want to at least have some care for it, And we have the opportunity to have some active role in how that is balanced and justly done, right? So if we ever think about complaining, well, how am I participating in that? How am I doing it, not just yelling it in my room or against the TV, but actually in a thoughtful manner, in a careful manner, seeking to be good neighbors with one another, not just yelling platitudes, but having actually good arguments and thoughts and research, right? So these are just some points flowing from the first part of that phrase, render to Caesar what is Caesar's. However, a lot of times that's usually what's focused on in that phrase. But I think infinitely more important is the second dictate of the Lord. Render to God what is God's. Because hopefully you realize by that phrase, Jesus wasn't calling Caesar God, right? Keep government in its place, but ultimately render to God what is God's. Our citizenship is in heaven. St. Paul reminds us of this in Philippians chapter 3, verse 20, right? And so the main goal of each of our lives must be to spread the kingdom of God. We must spread the good news, the gospel, that Jesus Christ has reunited us to our Heavenly Father. So when we live his life in our own lives, he gives beauty and purpose and meaning to our lives. Both in the Baltimore Catechism and the New Catechism, the 83 Catechism of the Catholic Church, puts this succinctly. I bet you many of you remember the answer to this question. Some of you, were probably had a lot of drilling of this, So the question, why did God make me? Y'all remember? Hopefully you remember, right? It was, God made me to know him, to love him, and to serve him in this world, and to be happy with him forever the next. And that truth has not faded with time. Let's break each of those apart. So to know him. In the New Catechism that we have right now expands on this. It says, the world was made for the glory of God. Creation testifies to that glory. Man is the pinnacle of God's creation. In coming to know him through his creation and through revelation, we can better testify to his glory. His perfection is made manifest through the benefits which he bestows on creatures. And man, humanity, collectively and individually, is chief among those creatures. So to put this simply, we could look at all of creation and say, how great is our God? We look at ourselves and at other people and say, how wonderful is our God? And so to know God is to experience him in the trillions and trillions of ways that creatures reflect his presence. This is why some of the greatest scientists that have ever lived are people of profound faith. The more they learn about creation, the greater the respect the Creator. To love him. So God made me and you and every man or woman who has ever lived or will ever live to love him. The word love has sadly lost much of its deep meaning today when we use it as a synonym for like, or perhaps don't hate. I might say that I love pizza, or I love chocolate cake, but I don't really love them. I like them. I prefer them. However, I love other people because I can see God's presence in them. I love you because I can see God's presence in you. Even if we struggle to understand what love really means, God understands it perfectly. And not only is he perfect love, but his perfect love lies at the very heart of the Trinity. When we say that God made us to love him, we mean that he made us to share in the love that the three persons of the Holy Trinity have for one another. Love enriches us. That is why St. Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, said that some of the most affluent people in the world are also the poorest people. They have everything except love. See, the beauties of material creation are meant to lead us closer to God, not away from him. St. Augustine realized this. Before he turned to God, he let the very things that God had created stand in the way of God's presence. We were not created for the material world. We were created for love, to serve him. God is greater than us. He created us and sustains us in being. It's one of the reasons why we come to Mass. It's to remind ourselves of who God is and who we're not. He's God and not us. And so we need at least once a week to be reminded of that intentionally. Like, okay, God, you are you, and I owe you everything. And so in serving him, we serve ourselves as well, right? In the sense that each of us becomes that unique person that God wishes us to be. In serving him, he helps us to realize who we are in our fullest self. And so we're meant to live for God. That is service. And to be happy with him forever. When God made me and you and everyone else, he intended for us to be drawn into the very life of the Trinity and to enjoy eternal happiness. He wants us to be happy. But as he defines happiness, right? But he gave us the freedom to make that choice. This is what love is. Love is a choice. We choose to be with him forever. That's why what we do and what we say are so important. They need to line up. What we say must line up with what we do. It's like if one spouse says to the other, I love you, but every action they do contradicts those words. Wouldn't that put to question the very nature of that love? If I told you I loved you, but I kept slapping you, wouldn't you start doubting my words? I would think so. I would hope so. So we choose to be with him forever. And the things that we say and the things that we do reveal that choice. And hopefully we choose to reject all that is not him. We fight against sin. And a reward of that fight is union with God. We can have a glimpse of this union in our life while we are in the physical world. There are times, sometimes just fleeting moments, when we feel completely at peace with ourselves and with God. Hopefully, you have memories of these moments. You've experienced these moments. You can, I'll tell you, I can probably count on one hand how many of these moments that I've had. But I can tell you, I have lived on these for my whole life. There's one moment in particular that has sustained me for years. Every time I have moments of difficulty, every time I have moments of potential despair, I'm like, no. Evil one, no, you do not win this moment. I know the reality of God. I've glimpsed it. I felt it. I've experienced my deepest bone, and you cannot make me forget. Out of here. How wonderful life will be when we are completely united to God. That is heaven. So render unto God what is God's. What is God's? The world is the Lord's and its fullness thereof. We hear in Psalm 24. Other people are the Lord's. We are the Lord's. He has given himself to us so that we can live for him. We belong to him. When we care for others, particularly those who reach out to us in their need, we care for his presence within them. Remember, we hear this in Matthew 25, as often as you do this for the least of my brothers and sisters, you do it for me. So a good Catholic cares for his or her country because they love God and wants their country, their nation, to continue to reflect the love of God in every aspect of national life. No matter, sometimes wherever one is in the world can be more difficult or easier than be able to do this. To render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? And so in the ways that we can, in living out what Christ is saying in the gospel, okay, how can I serve my country properly, despite sometimes the difficulties that it is? You know, no matter the situation I'm in, we want to pray for our brothers and sisters around the world who can have more difficulty than others. You know, living under dictatorships, totalitarianisms. You know, how do you be a good citizen under that? What does that mean? It's challenging. But remember, this is Jesus who's saying this with people under occupation in themselves. So by thinking thoughtfully, okay, how can I do this today to be a faithful citizen? It's not just by being lockstep, but by thinking thoroughly, thoughtfully. How is this, what I'm promoting, reflecting the kingdom of God? When we do this as a committed Catholic, we will be serving God. So our prayer today is for God to help us render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but more importantly, unto God's what is God's.